Okay, so I figured it out. So if you just go a little bit, see?
Go a little bit what?
See, if you just touch the little volume thing a little bit.
Oh, the volume.
Yeah, because remember I told you, it's like you go from 0 to, you go from 60 to 0, right?
Yeah.
And just, I'm like, why is this doing this? I don't understand. But then again, I'm not understanding a lot of things. And you know what, Michael? You know what?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm a very poor communicator. I just called our guest, Andrew Speno.
And?
So what did I tell you before we came on? He said, what time? And I said 10 of. And you said, I bet you misunderstood that.
Yeah, who talks like that? This isn't
It's 10 of. Come on. Julia's already on. She says good morning.
As always, good morning to Julia.
We are always love that you are there. So yeah, so I totally flubbed it up and I called Andrew, who was like, but you said so he will be on, but you and I are gonna tap dance a little bit until
he's gotta get ready for the cameras. That's what he's got to get ready for the cameras.
I feel terrible. I bet you he's gonna make fun of me for this, and probably Julia.
Well, as soon as you said that to me, as soon as you said I told him 10 of, I'm like 10 of what?
Lisa's on this morning. Good morning, Lisa. Hey, Michael, did you get your art done? Because there's more rain coming.
No, I didn't.
Okay, since we have a few minutes before our guest joins us, did you hear about what happened yesterday?
Well, I don't know. A lot of stuff happened. What are we talking about?
Oh, I know. It's very true, isn't it? There's so much stuff that happens now. Yeah, it's true. Again, I'm a very poor communicator. Okay, so here's what happened yesterday. Do you remember we have talked about this on this show, Bill SB 224, creating the state longitudinal database. And I have talked about this a long time. We have articles up on our new website, our recent website. What? Hold on. There were fish swimming on the Lindsay High School baseball field.
Wow.
Oh my goodness. Well, and then, we saw the giant sinkhole out in Grady County somewhere. Yeah, it's not good. So anyway, back to SB 224. We've talked about this and said, we don't want this bill. We don't want to collect any more data on kids. So here's what happened yesterday. It had not passed the House. Okay, it was brought up on the House floor. It had passed the Senate. It came over to the House. It was brought up on the House floor. The House voted it down. But Representative Caldwell, whose bill it was, captured it, meaning even though it went down, he said, I want the opportunity to bring it back up again. So it was brought up yesterday afternoon, and they brought it up for a vote. And guess what?
Passed.
It didn't pass again.
Okay.
So what they did was they removed the chair and reran the bill until 17 people flipped to get the bill to pass.
Really? Now, why? How come none of that has ever happened on any bill we've tried to put out there?
Because we're not the Chamber of Commerce or a private company called, we'll do more. And just so that you know, you guys that are on, we're doing a special. Moms for Liberty, Sherry Connolly are going to be, we're all going to be together on Monday morning at 9 o'clock for a rope report special where we're going to talk about all of this. And just before we went on the air, Tom Gann sent me this. Tom Gann issues statement on bonus vote. I love Tom Gann. There are so many things about, oh, I like this. Well, I like this. It's a Fourth Amendment violation. After arm twisting and promises made. That's how the weenies operate.
Well, it's
okay,
bull.
so this is
it's literally bull.
This is what Representative Gann sent me. Representative Tom Gann, RINOLA, issues statement on bonus vote of SB 224 and warns of the dangers of setting new policy. Representative Tom Gann released the following statement on the unprecedented bonus vote taken by the House on Thursday on Senate Bill 224. On Thursday, May 1st, 2025, Representative Kyle Hilbert, Speaker of the House, took actions regarding SB 224 that did not align with the House rules of the 60th legislature. House rules dictate that once a bill is defeated, it is not eligible for additional consideration. The House vote to defeat SB 224 was considered final action under the rules. However, Hilbert, while presiding over the House, allowed an additional bonus vote to occur by which the bill was approved. This breaks with years of clearly established House precedent that prevents never-ending bonus votes on failed legislation and opens up a Pandora's box of potential abuse. What other bills will he allow a bonus vote? The relevant House rule and written precedent are attached to this release, and he puts it on there. It's House Rule 6, Bills and Resolutions, Final Action. The following action shall constitute final action on any bill or resolution. Number 1, committee recommendation, including any oversight committee recommendation or any policy committee recommendation of, quote, do not pass. Number 2 is the big one. Number 2, if a motion to reconsider the vote on third reading or fourth reading fails to prevail or it expires. B, if final action is such as to defeat a bill or resolution, no other bill or resolution having the same effect and covering the same specific subject matter shall be considered by the House of Representatives during either session of the current legislature. So I'm going to post this. It'll be posted on that House website under media. Please go find that. But I do want to make this point, not just that I love Rep. Gann, which I do, but here's the point I want to make. His point is precisely accurate. So just anytime I feel like it, I can just continue to get a vote on a bill until it passes.
Yeah.
I mean, is that,
that's how it is.
The thing.
Good old boys club.
What?
I said good old boys club.
So we've had a particular former EA who has been making comments on all of our posts about Sandra Treywick being prevented from coming back in the Energy Committee by Senator Green, who is the chair. And then remember at the beginning of that meeting, Senator Green told everybody in the room, there won't be any videoing, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
No
so
videoing.
because Videoing. It's one word.
Leave the G off.
Correct. It's one word, videoing. So, and that's the fact that they conspire behind closed doors to pull this off is, I'd say that's part of the problem. Yes, but you're absolutely correct. Tyrants are like that. I completely agree. So here's what our EA friend has been saying under everything that we've been talking about with Sandra. Well, the Senate and the House get to make up their own rules. It's in the rules that they get to make up their own rules.
Yeah. Wow.
But then they have rules. And then as Representative Tom Gann said and pointed out and showed the rule, there is a rule that says you can't do this. Right? So even though there are rules, we'll just make up other rules and do whatever we want. Do you know who wants that bill? Senate Bill 224? The Chamber of Commerce. Do you know who else wants the bill? Our governor. Do you know how we know? Because this is all workforce related, and it actually says it on the Chamber of Commerce, Oklahoma Chamber of Commerce website, that's one of the things that they wanted to get done this year was pass a state longitudinal database. We've had a state longitudinal database since 2012. Julia, Lynn, and I worked on that for years and years and years. We know all about that. They're saying now it's not hooked together. Well, if it's not hooked together, where did the $4.5 million we got from the Obama administration go to, under a Race to the Top grant, go to put it all together? What have they been doing? Has it been a lot of nose picking and visiting? I mean, what's been going on? I'm just curious because there was money for it, right? Guess what? We have our guest with us. Dude, he did that in 12 minutes. 12 minutes.
What did you like wake him up, say, go take a shower, shave, get dressed?
Fox reporter, he knows how to do stuff. He doesn't need me. Hang on one second, though. There are two questions. Give me 1 second, Andrew. Workforce means that they want to groom your kids for particular work that benefits the government. Bingo.
Yeah.
Bingo. It's creating kid widgets for the jobs that the Chamber of Commerce brings in. And I'm sure there's some kind of kickback involved that they bring in a business. And I mean, they certainly, if they bring in a business, then they get the money for the Chamber of Commerce membership, right?
Or as I like to call it, Jenny, you say kid widgets. I like to say automatons. They're all the automatons just lined up for work there.
This guy, Adam, nice to meet you, Adam. According to Oklahoma statute 70-10-105, neglect or refusal to compel a child to attend school, we are fined and jailed for up to 15 days, each as coercion to enforce unconstitutional acts against we the people. It's true. So it only matters to us. We're the ones that are in trouble. They get to make up their own rules. It's awesome. Okay, well, we are going to bring on our friend Andrew because I want to know the Hellen Keller thing. So I'm going to bring him on. Dude, you are like amazing. Uh-oh. I can't hear you. You muted yourself. There you are.
I was muted. I apologize. I am back. How are you? Good morning.
You are amazing. You really are.
Oh, well, it's nice of you to say that. I was more worried that I was just simply bad luck for you because the last time I was on this podcast, your farm burned down. So I am praying.
That was it?
It was the very same day. So I was very sorry to hear about that, of course.
Oh, that's right. It was. You were on in the morning. I'm not, get off.
Based on today, your farm might get flooded. It really, it really depends. Good morning, Michael. How are you?
Good morning, sir. In honor of you, the Andrew Speno, I wore my Lincoln gangster shirt here.
Beautiful.
See, if that was it, this is probably the true portrayal of Lincoln right there.
There you go. There you go.
That is nice. Hey, I want you to tell everybody what you did. It was last weekend. What did you do last weekend?
What I did last weekend? Yeah. I can't remember that far back.
Oh, stop. You were the MC.
Of the Smoke and Guns Mixed Martial Arts Charity event. This is a thing we've been doing since 2014. It's cops versus firefighters inside the cage. They duke it out. All the money goes to charity. If the cop wins, the money goes to Special Olympics. Let me turn off my phone. If the firefighter wins, it goes to the firefighters burn camp for kids. We've raised hundreds of thousands of dollars for these charities, and it's just a big fun event. You need to come, both of you.
I didn't even know it was happening, or I
Yeah.
would have. That would have been really fun.
Yeah.
It is a ton of fun. I'll give you a heads up next year.
Please do. And you look so dapper and just out there emceeing.
Oh, well, they made me wear a tux, so I can't take
Great.
credit.
That's
Very kind of you.
great.
Thank you.
I loved it. I was very sad I wasn't there. I was like, dang it. I actually would have gone to that. I never leave my house, but I would have gone to that.
You would have come to Tulsa for that one. No, it was a great event. I guess we had about 8,000 people there. Yeah, it's a great time for a great cause. I highly recommend coming next year. I'll give you a heads up.
Well, please do, because that was really awesome. And that was cool. Okay, so tell us what we need to know here.
Okay, about Hellen Keller?
Yes.
Okay,
well, before you get going, but I just always thought it was the craziest thing. Like, I don't know where you're going to go or how it's going to, play out. But I saw some of the videos just in the past of her just, like standing there with her hand on her translator's lips or whatever, standing there. And I thought it was the craziest thing ever. Just the craziest thing.
Right. Well, we're all taught this story in school. It's an inspirational story that I'll tell you. Let me put it this way. Okay. Can you tell me what color a stop sign is? What color is a stop sign?
Red.
Yeah.
Red. Okay. What color is a yield sign?
Yellow, right?
Okay. Michael, do you agree with yellow?
Yeah.
Okay. Yield signs have not been yellow for decades.
Really?
They were all switched over to red and white.
No.
Oh, yeah, I guess they are.
That's
red.
true. Oh my gosh.
So every day we drive down the street and we have evidence staring us in the face that yield signs are now red and white. But when we're asked what color is a yield sign, we automatically say yellow. And I did the same thing when I was asked that question. It's because I learned it once and I never went back to re-examine it.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
In light of, this is going to be a crazy theory, but bear with me. This theory is that the media is capable of lying to us.
What?
Okay? And when we think of
you
media,
mean like all the way back to Walter Cronkite and Dan Rather?
I know this is shocking information.
No.
But when we think of media, we think of the news. We think of TV news, we think of NPR and the New York Times and these things. But history books are also media. They tell a story. And so I think in an age where we can clearly see that we have been lied to about a lot of things for a really long time, let's go back and re-examine some of the things that are accepted as universal truths. So that's what I kind of started working on. I started with Abraham Lincoln, which we talked about last time, and Hellen Keller is our next victim of what ends up is
I would argue we're probably the victim.
Yeah, we're the victim of Hellen Keller.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe not Hellen Keller, her translator, whoever.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. And that's it. Okay. So we all know the story of Hellen Keller, right? She was born in Alabama, 1880. At 19 months old, she went completely deaf and completely blind. There's a bronze statue of Hellen Keller at the U.S. Capitol. She's on the back of the Alabama Quarter. So, I mean, this is an icon within American history. So the story is when she was 6 years old, so for 4.5 years, from 1.5 to 6 years old, she's completely deaf and blind and totally dysfunctional. But then this woman comes into her life, Anne Sullivan, the miracle worker. Okay? And with time and dedication and patience, Anne Sullivan makes this big breakthrough. Do you remember that movie from 1962 called The Miracle Worker about this? And they showed her at like the water well, and she's pumping water, and she does like this tactile signing into her hand, and all of a sudden Hellen Keller gets it, and she understands, oh, this means water, and this means that, and all this. She basically understood how to communicate based off this interaction. Now, here's a little sidebar fun fact of this story that you remember Patty Duke, the actress?
Yes, yes.
Patty Duke show. She won an Oscar in 1962 for her portrayal of Helen Keller in that movie.
I remember that. Yeah.
Then in 1979, Patty Duke won an Emmy for the made-for-TV movie in which she played Anne Sullivan.
Yeah.
Now, Patty Duke ended her career as a panelist on Match Game, but that's
Yes, she
really
did.
that's immaterial to the story. Just a little fun fact. But the Helen Keller story, it's inspiring. It's iconic. Everyone knows it, right? And Helen Keller would live to be 87 years old. And according to history books, here's just a handful of the things that she accomplished. Okay. Helen Keller got a college degree in 4 years. Helen Keller wrote 4 books. She gave 475 speeches all over the world. She advocated for civil rights. She advocated for worker rights. And that story, as told, is certainly a miracle. But that story also makes no sense whatsoever. And it's one of these stories we hear, we accept it as fact, and we never go back to really understand it. Okay. So let's re-examine the story of Helen Keller. So, was Helen Keller able to communicate? Well, according to Anne Sullivan, yes. But Anne Sullivan was the only one who could translate, who could interpret what she was saying. No one else could understand Helen Keller without Anne Sullivan's interpretation. And according to the legend, Helen Keller learned how to communicate within 1 month of Anne Sullivan's arrival. Okay. And she mastered these concepts: racial discrimination, women's suffrage, religion, government, economics, labor relations. Now think about this. Helen Keller, according to the story, had 3 functional senses, right? We all have 5 senses: sight, sound, touch, taste, smell. Helen Keller only had touch, taste, and smell. Okay. Now I want you to imagine trying to explain to someone the concept of not just religion, but the idea of religious discrimination to another person. Explain that using only touch, taste, and smell. Could you explain race or government or economics? Of course not. No one could do that. So the conclusion here is either Helen Keller was not fully deaf and blind, or Anne Sullivan was lying. So let's take a look. Okay.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. Like, so you said she went deaf and blind at 9 months, so it's not like
19 months old, so a year and a half, a toddler.
So she wouldn't be able to have the concept of speech and all that stuff really at 19 months.
No.
I mean, for later on to be able to associate whatever tactile stuff that Sullivan's doing to whatever, to whatever she may have thought or learned in the past. So there's no real way.
Yeah, I mean, unless you know a 19-month-old who has mastered economics, world governments.
Well, I did, but there aren't a lot of us out there.
You and Helen Keller apparently are the exceptions. Okay, so Helen Keller had all these opinions on these things, and let's take a look at what they were, right? Because despite her physical handicaps, she had some really deep insights into incredibly complex issue. She somehow learned about the various forms of world governments. And not only was she able to grasp the concepts of capitalism, socialism, Marxism, fascism, she had opinions on each one. And which form of government did Helen Keller decide was best? Marxism.
Marxism. Oh,
wow.
She joined the American Socialist Party in 1909. In 1912, she wrote an essay called How I Became a Socialist. She publicly supported the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia, and she specifically praised Vladimir Lenin and the Russian Revolution in her 1929 memoir called Midstream. And that same year, she told a reporter that she was a socialist and a Bolshevik. Okay? So, Helen Keller.
Hold on just a second. In all honesty, I feel so stupid right now.
We didn't know any better. You go to school and school says, hey, this lady's great. look at all these accomplishments you can do. Look at this. And then that's it.
Yeah.
Well,
Yes,
and I guess when you teach young kids that kind of thing, right? Because I remember learning about Hellen Keller when I was in elementary school, not so much when I got older.
mhm.
And I think, and obviously in elementary school, your worldview is pretty tight, right? Because you just haven't had a lot of experiences. But it is so weird that even as an adult, it never struck me to think, how in the world could that happen? And just you saying that out loud honestly makes me feel
Well, no,
moronic.
when I was 6 years old, I thought Hong Kong Phooey was real. So there's nothing wrong with being a little kid who believes a goofy story, but don't feel stupid because I bought into the story until a couple of years ago when someone brought this up, and I started doing some research and concluded, not to give away the ending, that this story is a total fraud. Okay, so let's talk about Anne Sullivan, the miracle worker. Okay, who she was and what her thoughts were on the world. And the reason she's important is because we all know about Helen Keller's ideas and her abilities, but that comes from one single source, Anne Sullivan. Okay? And Helen Keller and Anne Sullivan became active in labor strikes, in anti-war protests during World War One. And wouldn't you know, just as luck would have it, Helen Keller's political ideology perfectly aligned to Anne Sullivan's. Okay? Now, Anne Sullivan, like all communist leaders, she lived and died in luxury. And when she died in 1936, she had an estimated net worth of anywhere between $1 and $5 million. Now, we talk about this, now it seems like an obvious fraud, but fraud was suspected very early on. And in fact, Anne Sullivan was sued for fraud because allegedly Helen Keller, when she was 11 years old, wrote her first short story. It was called The Frost King. Okay. And in this story, Helen Keller, who cannot see, describes the leaves as, let me read this, painted ruby, emerald, gold, crimson, and brown. Does that make any sense to you?
Well, not when you.
And even Anne Sullivan's early supporters turned on her. It's this guy who originally championed her work and thought she was a miracle worker, a guy named Franklin Sanborn. He called for the censure of Anne Sullivan in 1906. It was a resolution at the Perkins School Board where she taught, which repudiated the idea that she taught Helen Keller at all. And one of the strongest proponents of Sullivan was a woman named Julia Ward Howe. She was a 19th century feminist, and she wrote the Battle Hymn of the Republic. In a letter that's now in the archives at Radcliffe, she wrote, "It was with deep sorrow that we finally became convinced that the impressions given to the public regarding Helen's performances were far from corresponding with the facts of the case." So Anne Sullivan was the only person who could translate Helen Keller's words. Basically, Anne Sullivan turned her into a trained SEAL. And it begs this question, and I think it kind of answers it as well, is why didn't Anne Sullivan teach anyone else how to communicate with this woman? She never did. Anne Sullivan was the only one who could, right? Now, this breakthrough was made in 1890, right? So I did a little, rudimentary research.
Now, wait, hold on. Which breakthrough? Her, Anne Sullivan communicating with Helen Keller?
Right. With this, what they call the tactile sign language. Where, touch on the hand. This means labor conditions are unbearable in Eastern Europe, and the workers of the world must unite against the capitalist pigs. Right. So this breakthrough was made in 1890. So the official condition is called deaf blindness, and today it affects 0.2% of the population.
Wow.
So about 160 million people currently live with deaf blindness.
Oh gosh.
And in 2022, so 3 years ago, the National Deaf Blind Child Count report of kids aged 0 to 2 in the United States, 548 kids. In Oklahoma, 8. 8 kids have deaf blindness. So Anne Sullivan came into Hellen Keller's life when she was 6 years old and 8 months. Okay. So since Sullivan's this miracle work, thousands of human beings have been affected with no sense of sight, no sense of sound, can't see and hear. But 135 years later, Anne Sullivan's success has never been duplicated. So think of all the advances in technology we have developed since 1890. It's incalculable. And not only have there been very limited advancements in this discipline, what Anne Sullivan did has never been duplicated. Why? Because the Hellen Keller story is not true. And I find this particularly sad for the state of Alabama, who decided to put Hellen Keller on the back of their state quarter. You know, we decide on the scissortail flycatcher, which is lame, but at least the scissortail flycatcher actually exists. So my condolences,
And it's beautiful.
Alabama, for being duped. Oh, I love the scissortail flycatcher, don't get me wrong. But okay, so I started looking into this story, and this was not my original idea that, hey, maybe this is BS. Someone else said it, and I started looking into it. So I started looking into what happens if you question the Hellen Keller story. So to not believe that Hellen Keller did these things makes you an ableist who questions the capabilities of marginalized groups. So just Google some articles on this topic and you'll see everyone denounce the idea that Hellen Keller was a fraud, but they offer no countervailing narrative to it. Every narrative is shame on the people who dare to question this story. You're a conspiracy theorist who buys into the whole fake news concept, right?
Wow.
And so all the people advocating for the truth of this story, they always cite Hellen Keller's writings without any consideration for the fact that Anne Sullivan actually wrote all this stuff.
Yeah.
So, you know, I was a journalist for a long time, and it taught me that when a story does not make sense, it's because there's information we do not have yet. And 99.999% of the time, the missing information of the story is that the story is not true. If a story doesn't make sense, 99.99% of the time, the story is not true. So I think the standard that everyone should use to determine whether a story is true is this reasonable? Now, is the Hellen Keller story possible? Yes, just as anything's possible. Just like it's possible that we're all really living in a computer simulation. Is that possible? Yes. Is it reasonable? No. So that's the standard for truth. Is it reasonable? My point being, the story of Hellen Keller is not reasonable, and it simply is not true. And I could go through tons of quotes from Hellen Keller about education, about government, about socialism, philosophy. Hellen Keller could even distinguish night and day, which if you have no sense of sight or sound, how could you possibly distinguish between night and day? This is a much briefer presentation than my Abraham Lincoln one, but there you go. My conclusion is the Hellen Keller wasn't a fraud. She was a victim of Anne Sullivan. Anne Sullivan was a fraud, and the whole story is not true.
What do we know? What do we know about her family? Was her family? I guess they were all part of this. I mean, you'd have to know that your own child can't do that. I mean, was there some aspect of embarrassment or disgrace, so they helped prop her up or anything?
That's actually a good question, because I did a little bit of research. There's not a lot of information about her parents other than that they were quite well to do, which is why they were able to hire this private tutor, Anne Sullivan, to come train up their dysfunctional deaf-blind child. But we do, or there's certainly no writings to indicate that Anne Sullivan passed this knowledge along to her parents so that they could communicate with her directly. If you wanted to talk to Hellen Keller, you had to go through Anne Sullivan as an intermediary, and she'll tell you what Hellen Keller had to say.
Well, I want to go to some of our comments because there are actually a couple that might be real that are pretty interesting here. And this is, I mean, I think this is probably the foundational comment for all of them, because it just occurred to me as you were talking, even before Adam said this. What an excellent propaganda tool for the Marxists, right? I mean,
oh yeah,
what an excellent propaganda tool. Then Tammy said this, which is interesting, and I want to know the answer to this question. What pact was formed on behalf of Hellen Keller?
I don't know that there was a pact, but I do know that Hellen Keller was one of the founding members of the ACLU.
Well, it is a pack though too. The ACLU does have a pack, so that's I would imagine that's what Tammy meant. Tammy, if not, chime back in. And Julia says, "How do you learn to write?" It's like I don't know why. And then Tammy also says that Dr. Seuss was Hellen Keller's ghostwriter. And I'm having trouble remembering what his name is.
No. Theodore Geisel.
Geisel.
Let's see, I'm estimating here, he would have been born around maybe in the 19 teens.
20, maybe.
Yeah, 1920.
Ish.
And so Hellen Keller would have been 30 by that time and was a world-known figure.
Well, that's interesting. She learned to write with a special tool. Some of her samples are at her home museum. It definitely looks as though it's true. Probably my grandmother, who read every book she could get her hands on, or my mother, who sees stuff through stuff like this. So Anne Sullivan just used Hellen Keller as a front. And that's kind of what, I mean, it seems, because if you're a Marxist, I mean, these people are just sneaky and creepy.
Oh, deception is a cornerstone of Marxism.
Correct. So it seems to me like that would be, the thing to do. It always seems suspicious to me too, but honestly, I never really dwelt on it too much. But my dad said it was impossible to know how much really came from her since there was no one else who could communicate with her. Yeah. And Adam said gaslighting.
Gaslighting. There you go.
That was Hellen Keller was our original gaslighter.
Or Anne Sullivan was.
And I'm sorry, Anne Sullivan. Yeah. Laura Bridgman learned to sew, write, make beautiful textiles, and teach others long before Hellen Keller. She was also a student at the Perkins School, but her story has been largely unknown.
Okay. So I called up a couple of institutions that specialize in deaf blindness.
Yeah.
And they were saying the legal definition of deaf blindness is you don't have to be completely deaf and completely blind. You just have to meet the standard. Now, all the writings about Hellen Keller say that she was completely blind and completely deaf.
Okay. So nothing, no spectrum.
Nothing. Okay. Either she wasn't completely blind and completely deaf, which there's nothing to indicate that that's the case, or Anne Sullivan was full of it and was using Hellen Keller as a tool to advance her own Marxist ideology, quite successfully, I might add.
Yeah, I'd check that box, Andrew.
You on board with that one?
Yeah. Well, Jenny,
but and it sort of that makes sense. Isn't that weird how it never, what you're telling me didn't make sense until I just thought about it. But then what does make sense to me is that she would have been used by a Marxist. Go figure that. I'm like all in for that.
Yeah. As much as things change, it's amazing how much they stay the same.
Because if you think about it, so that period in time, because remember the 1920s was really when the Marxists started pushing the socialist movement. Remember the 20s were just full of it, right? Progressive, we love progressivism, right? So it just makes some kind of sense to me that they would have found, or her parents, maybe even, maybe they were socialist Marxists. Maybe, they were the ones who found Anne Sullivan and to use their own daughter as a backdrop for pushing progressivism and socialism. I don't know, but there's something about it that makes a little sense.
Okay, and that very well may be the case. I didn't find any evidence to support that theory.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know how many communists there were in rural Alabama in the 19th century, but it's possible. I didn't see any writings about it.
Though, Andrew, because if you read has Scout in it, it's about, I don't know why I can't think
Mockingbird.
Thank you. If you read To Kill a Mockingbird, and you realize when that was written, and so what that was 40s, early 50s, right? Am I saying this right?
Sounds about right.
So, yeah.
By author Gregory Peck. Yeah.
Even then.
That was a joke. All right, go ahead.
Wait, what did you say?
I said by author Gregory Peck.
Oh, by author Gregory Peck. Yes.
No,
not
sorry.
by Gregory Peck. He was the dad in the movie.
Yeah, he played Atticus Finch.
Yes. But you look at what Scout says in that book about her teacher coming in, and she had the long nails and everything was group work, and they wouldn't let her read like Atticus wanted her to read, and she hated school because she thought it was stupid and they weren't learning anything. And it was, to me, that whole section of the book was basically, and I can't remember what the author's name is either. It's like, I don't know. Anyway, it was kind of like her telling people, this is how the progressive movement got into societies, even in these small rural towns, was through the school, because they were being pumped out at the teachers' college well before 1920. So I don't know.
And here we are 100 years later. We have the same concepts being taught in colleges. It shouldn't be any surprise when teachers and, especially on journalists, I almost feel like you can only blame them so much because they're doing exactly what they were taught to do, to advocate for a specific political agenda and ideology. The problem starts at the top. And then, depending on how deep you want to get into it, is shame on Republicans and conservatives for completely dropping the ball on ignoring school board elections. I think we're awake now. We know what's going on, but for decades, school boards were infiltrated by these people and still are. What's amazing is, in Edmond, Oklahoma, probably, the reddest place in the reddest of red states, we just had a school board election. And did the conservative win? No. The leftist won and is now on the Edmond School Board. So, once you realize what has been happening for decades, where we are today shouldn't come as a terrible shock.
Well, and to go back to, because there are, you're getting some good comments. I know, you're getting good comments today, Andrew. And Lisa says, the standards could have been different. That's true. But this reminds me of the potential abuse of Greta Thunberg if she actually is autistic as reported.
Oh, that's a whole other topic I'd love to get into. Not today, but the exploitation of autistic people. Or
the exploitation of even children too. You know what I mean? It's just, it's unconscionable. And then we were talking about who are Anne Sullivan's parents or grandparents. Are they lawyers? This is a good one though. I wonder if the same applies to Stephen Hawking. Did they run the same play again? And I don't know, because I don't know that much about Stephen Hawking. I didn't really.
I think he debilitated like after his 20s or 30s is when he really started to have issues.
Yeah, he had Lou Gehrig's disease, right?
Yeah.
ALS.
Okay.
So yeah, I think he was functional into adulthood.
Interesting. Oh, this is interesting. The CIA Operation Mockingbird was believed to have started in the 1940s. Dr. Seuss, 1904, 1991, Hellen Keller, 1880 to 19. Good call, Andrew. Thanks, Julia.
Okay. Dr. Seuss was older than I thought.
Yeah, I didn't know he was that old either because I thought he was 1920, but my goodness, back to 1904. But he was still I mean, there was still a big difference between him and Hellen Keller. I think that would be odd.
Yeah, I did quite a bit of research on this. I didn't see any connection to Dr. Seuss. Maybe there is, I just didn't see it.
But Tammy wants to know, were there any German connections?
That I don't know. I didn't see anything to indicate that either.
Lincoln was buddies with Karl Marx, so the Marxist influence could have been pretty large in the late 1800s. That's a really good point, don't you think, Andrew?
Yeah, and that is true. Yeah, Abraham Lincoln and Karl Marx were like pen pals.
And see, we don't get taught that, and then we wonder why we have what we have. And it's, again, we talk about this all the time. I think Michael said this 6 times last podcast. Frog in the boiling water. Right? Yeah. I mean, it's been going on for so long and just a little bit at a time with us buying it. And mainly the infection centers have been public schools, right? So when they find something like Hellen Keller that they can stick in the curriculum, oh, she was great. And,
what's sad is that there are unlimited numbers of genuinely inspiring stories, people who have overcome disabilities or handicaps or whatever. So if we're looking to inspire kids, those stories are out there. It's just this one, I'm convinced, is not true.
Well, we saw about Sun Tzu, and I think
I agree with Gracie.
Okay, what's Gracie? Gracie said in that era, rich parents were embarrassed by handicapped kids and would just push them off on a nanny or such to be free of them. And I think there is probably.
Well, I mean, who wants to, as a rich person that has means back then, you don't want to have one of your children look like they're deficient or not up to your standards or whatever. I mean, I think they probably went along with the whole deal.
Well, yeah, because then all of a sudden she became a celebrity, right? And then that was the purpose for her, was to be a celebrity. John says, selected education for slow indoctrination. Yeah. Yep.
There you go.
And Darlene's happy that you told the truth about Lincoln. So.
Well, she needs to go back and watch the episode we did.
The whole podcast.
6 weeks ago or whatever.
You should, Darlene. Go to our YouTube channel. Our YouTube channel or our Rumble channel. It's on both places, and you can look up and see it was a great podcast, except I was looking through part of it the other day and I sat here like this most of the time.
Well, see, I take that as a compliment.
Utter disbelief. I can't believe I missed it. I had an attorney meeting that we had to go to, and I missed it. Dang it.
Yeah, it was awesome.
For your absence.
Tammy said maybe she was confusing doctors.
Well, Jenny, I found one of these magic tactile language videos with a close-up. So I'll put it up here in a second. But after watching this a couple times, if you pay attention, half of the movements that she makes on her hand, she doesn't even touch her hand. She's making all these movements with her fingers. She's not even touching her hand. Watch this.
Okay.
Watch this.
Helen's eyes and ears on the world. She talks with Helen by a finger system in which each letter has a sign, like this. In reaching out beyond her boundless night.
Yeah, and then hang on, watch this. You're gonna hear she's talking just a little bit right here.
It is the attitude that appointment is not being able to speak normally.
It is the acute disappointment in not being able to speak normally.
Longingly, I think how much more good I might have done if I had only acquired natural speech.
Lonely, I
understand.
feel how much more good I could have done if I had acquired normal speech.
But
Is anything legible? I mean, come on.
Well, I feel sorry for this poor woman. Well, I mean, she had a pretty nice life from what I could tell. Hellen Keller did. As nice as of a life as you can, but when you're deaf and blind.
I'm doing it again. I just noticed.
Jenny, your thoughts on that video?
That was the, yeah, I mean, yeah, I just feel like I got gaslighted.
Well, you would think, Andrew, that someone at some point would at least try to replicate that, even if they didn't learn how Sullivan was doing that. They would at least try to replicate that and work it out somehow. But obviously, nothing has ever happened with anyone that's had that condition since.
Yeah, and we've had 135 years to work on it since then. And there have been no advances. It's never been duplicated. And like I said, there's thousands and thousands of deafblind people. Worldwide, there's millions today. And so think of how many have lived and died for the last 135 years, and nobody else was able to do this. That is a miracle.
Wow.
Well, this is interesting. Did you find this? Lisa said, keep in mind, we've been told Helen was a genius who was already speaking before she lost her 2 senses. So she was already speaking at 18 months?
Well, probably the same as how she's speaking in that video.
Well, and there you go. I mean, if that element were true, I would expect her to be a lot more articulate than she was in that video.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, she would at least be able to form some words in some way that's decently.
Well, now that I don't know about. We'd have to talk, because when I was kind of interested in deafness for a while. I don't know why, and I was looking it up, and when you think about it, so if you can't hear yourself talk, your brain doesn't make the connection to the way to form the words. I mean, because it's a pathway, right? So you have to hear it, and then your brain translates the audible signals that come in, and it translates it, unscrambles them, makes sense of it, and then you can speak out what you've heard. But the problem is, it's not her brain that was the problem. But if she couldn't even hear the inflections or even those little inside the cochlea, there are these little hairs that pick up just the reverberations, just the sound waves, right? The physical aspect of the sound waves. If her brain couldn't get the signals from those little hairs in there that are getting the pressure waves, right? There's no possible way. Do you see what I'm saying? I mean, that literally, because even people who can see but who are deaf, if you hear them talk, they have a very odd way of talking. They can actually
but
because they can see the people. You can see other people forming the words, right?
Right.
And that's how they learn what it looks like. And so they can kind of mimic that. But if you were blind and you couldn't see that, and you had no way of actually feeling that pressure of somebody else speaking, I don't see that there's any way that could happen.
Yeah, but her way was, she put her hand on your face and she could feel the waves. I'll find one of those videos. That was how that lady taught her, was, the lady would be standing there talking, like taking questions, and Helen would have her hand on her face like this, and she'd be getting all the vibrations, to speak.
But here's the other go ahead, Andrew. I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead.
Well, I'm always, me, I'm always the argumentative one because
That's why I want you to go first.
If you did this though, because I'm feeling there is I mean, I am totally feeling that there is a pressure there that's going on. But the point of, I guess, that I'm thinking is your brain is wired in a certain way, right? And we all know this. Otherwise, our vision, we wouldn't be able to see, I mean, the pathways are there. So I don't know how you could get this pathway, right? Unscramble comes out. I don't know where you'd get this from this. I don't know. Do you follow what I'm saying? I mean, am I making some sense?
It makes sense to me. Yeah. And what makes sense is that the story doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
The story is BS.
Well, I mean, we've all heard, many deaf people speak, and you can still make out what they're saying in some way. I mean, that was completely illegible, but that's, supposedly coming from a genius that has produced, all these achievements. I mean, I would just think you'd have something that's a little more legible and one, or even be able to communicate with their parents,
Right.
at the very least.
And if this were a genuine method, Anne Sullivan would have said, hey, come here. I'll show you how to understand what Helen is saying.
Yeah. And
I'll
I
show
guess,
you
the
how to
biggest
talk to her.
point. Why wouldn't she do that then? Because deaf people, they go to deaf school, right? And their parents go so that they can learn how to do sign language and communicate with them.
Yeah. Yeah. And none of that happened.
So Helen was kept with her family from the time she lost her senses until Annie arrived. Why would they not have institutionalized her back then? They had finances.
I don't know. In my research, I really didn't see much about Hellen Keller's parents and their background. I mean, the information's probably out there. I didn't stumble upon it while I was looking into this. Were they in on the fraud? Did they simply buy into what Anne Sullivan was saying? If you were a parent of a child who was suffering the way a deafblind child would suffer, hope is it's a very powerful emotion. And if your hope is your child can live a functional, productive life, you might be willing to buy into the lie that she is.
Well, and she was comfortable. Both of my daughters were speaking in complete sentences at 9 months, but my mom told me that was just because I talked to them 24/7.
At 9
Julie,
months?
I do believe that, actually. And then Lisa said both of my girls were very, very early talkers as well. They were with me all day, as was Helen with her parents. It's not as common or strange as folks think. Well, and back then, for sure, we didn't rush them out the door to pre-K. So the kids
to
were
give them a
at home.
head start. Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
and I certainly, believe all that. But, on that same note, imagine that your child lost their sense of hearing and sight at that age. Then how would you explain these remarkably complicated concepts, like not only working, but a factory? How could you explain what a factory is? And then once you master the concept of what a factory is, mastering the concept of people working there, and then those people's working conditions and what their rights should be. Tell me how you would explain that to someone who had no sense of sight or sound after age 19 months.
Well, and here's my other thing too, because I'm sitting here as you're talking, trying to think these things out myself. And you read that piece a minute ago about the different colors, right? She was talking about leaves.
Yeah, that was her first published work.
Okay. So I'm sitting there and I'm trying to think, can you read that again? That just the
Yeah.
colors part?
Yeah, I'll have to pull it back up. Give me 1 second. Yeah, and that was the writing in which, yeah, the Frost King, and Sullivan was sued for fraud over this. In the story, she described the leaves as painted ruby, emerald, gold, crimson, and brown.
Okay, so I'm trying to think of this. I'm deaf and I'm blind. And my translator is explaining to me colors.
Using only touch, smell, and taste. Those are
And
the
a
only
color
senses
doesn't
she allegedly had.
smell. And I know that a lot of us who can see associate taste with different, like grape, I always associate with purple, for example, or cherry flavor with
right.
red, you know,
Mhm.
but then they don't have any of that. So then that can't work. So I can't figure out how she would even communicate to Anne Sullivan back. Yeah, I don't see how that. I just
It doesn't make
can't.
sense.
I
simply
got
doesn't
a, I
make
got a
sense.
good one for you. I got a good one for you, Jenny. It says Hellen Keller, a renowned deaf and blind activist, reportedly, which there's a lot of articles that supposedly back this up because I'm looking through the footnotes here, but reportedly flew a plane in 1946 over the Mediterranean Sea for 20 minutes. During this flight, she took control of the 4-engine Douglas C-54 Skymaster with assistance from her interpreter, who communicated the pilot's instructions to her through tactile sign language. Okay?
While she was holding a stick, which you would have to do in those early aircraft to keep them up. Wow, that's exemplary.
And maybe she did. I don't know. Maybe she did.
That's high tech. Now, I'll grant you that in that situation, you could do, the famous scene at the well, like water. They had water
Yes.
rushing on her hand, and I'm going to
Yes.
tap your hand like this. That makes sense. Okay.
I agree.
Thirsty water, food, tangible objects. You could break through on that. But complicated religious, political, socioeconomic concepts, there's no way.
Yeah.
Well, I just don't see it because I just can't see that.
And how many books did she write, Andrew?
I think it was 45. I got to go back and look at my notes here.
45.
No, 14. She wrote
14.
14 books. She gave 475 speeches.
She did.
Hellen Keller.
Like in the video that Michael just played.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. So Anne Sullivan would stand there and translate.
I need to look it up, but do you have just off the top of your head when did she write her first book? At what age?
The Frost King, which was a short story, age 11. That was the one in which she was describing the colors of leaves.
And Sullivan came into her life at 6.5 or so.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So maybe 5 years later.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
Just struggling. I don't know. Hold on. This is an interesting comment. That video of Anne and Helen reminds me of Stephen Hawking and his interpreter physicist, Mark King. You should watch the videos. That's interesting. I'm not sure which part was in the script, but
I'll have to go back and look at that.
The part about the abstract concepts is more difficult to explain, but I believe that because Helen and Anne, I love the fact that Lisa's I love that we're going at this at different angles. We're so incredibly enmeshed. It is possible. Their connection may have been more than what some consider emotionally healthy. Okay. Well, you would have to, you're 100% dependent on that you are 100%.
Right. Yeah. They have to spend every moment together.
And maybe to Lisa's point, maybe there was an actual communication link to there, but all we know is what was coming from Anne. Helen could have been communicating something completely different, and all we know is Anne was talking however she wanted, whatever she wanted to say.
Yeah, that's it. We'd have to take Anne Sullivan's word for it.
Well, and that's truth because 100%. Lisa, this is funny.
Fair point,
That's
Lisa.
right. Fair point. You get that one, Lisa. And Kim said, what do we know about Anne Sullivan? Because we have talked about Helen, but what about Anne? What was Anne's background?
Oh, well, she obviously she was a teacher. She worked at, I can't remember the name of the institute, but she was a resolution was introduced at that institute to denounce Anne Sullivan for faking this whole thing. So even people at the time understood that this really didn't make any sense.
Well, I'm just curious what her background was, because it would be interesting to know if she were a Marxist.
Oh yeah, she was. Yes.
Oh, she was already.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's well documented.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. All right. Julia said, yeah, it goes back to why was Hellen Keller the only student? Yeah. I mean, and yeah. We know a lot about her background. Actually, it was one of extreme hardship back in Ireland. You mean, are we talking about Anne? Pharmakita connection, all new diagnosis for research and development. Well, that's probably true.
What's Pharmakita? I'm not familiar with that.
I guess she meant pharmaceutical connection, because
Okay.
they're always looking for things, for R&D, because that's what gets them their money coming in, right? R&D.
Right.
But I just don't, I mean.
But you want to treat it, not cure it.
Oh. Well, you got to keep the customers coming back, don't you?
And it looks like she has another interpreter also after Sullivan.
Yeah, so Sullivan died in, I think, 36, and someone else took over. But it was the exact same setup.
Oh, okay. And yes, and hardship and some amount of torture with her medical conditions. Interesting. And then Tammy asked, did she get her teaching license revoked? Probably not. I mean, we don't revoke them here.
Did they have teaching license back then?
Well, and that's a good question. I don't know. Although I do think that was one of, I don't know why I have some kind of brain impediment for remembering his name. I can remember Horace Mann's, but I can't remember the other one that was even worse. I think he was the one who he started the teachers college, and I think the whole idea behind certification came from him.
I don't know the history of that, but
anyway.
I mean, Anne Sullivan dedicated her life to the Hellen Keller project.
Do we?
That point forward.
Lisa always helps me remember that one. Yes, John Dewey was the one when he started the teachers college at Columbia University. Part of the thing that he wanted to do is get this licensure thing going where teachers could be licensed. And I do think that was part of the problem, because you have to go through a program, right, to be licensed. And that's how you indoctrinate somebody, is through the program, right? Mm-hmm. So the person who's holding the license has been indoctrinated, but the person who's going to hire them doesn't, just looks at the license and go, oh, this is great. You've got a license, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, it's possible Anne didn't have any aspirations for using Helen, but took the opportunity when it presented itself with Helen. Everything may have aligned in this situation. And you could be, But see, I'm always going to be 10 to an order of magnitude larger than you on the cynicism scale. And I just feel like at that point in time where the progressive movement was really getting going, one of the things that they really would have needed would have been a billboard, right? And what would have been a better billboard than this incredible woman who was deaf and blind, but wanted to make sure workers weren't being exploited in a factory?
Right. Yeah. And understood the different concepts of government and what the role of government should be.
Yeah. So I just think there's too much in terms of the come on factor here.
Yeah. Can I take a total left turn?
No, not a left turn.
Because we're talking about licensing.
Right.
And again, this is totally off topic, but it keeps coming up, this licensing. So just let me throw this in. Is that about 60 years ago, about 1 in 50 professions required a professional license.
1 in 50.
Now it's about 1 in 4.
Yeah. Wow.
1 in 50.
Yeah. So
holy cow.
The whole reason we're supposed to have, most of licensing it's called occupational licensing. And in order to work in a certain field, you have to get a license from the government. And the whole concept behind it is that the license guarantees a minimum level of public health, public safety, consumer protection, and training and education among people who work in that field. Right? Now, you mentioned that last week I was doing sports announcing, right? I was doing the announcing at those fights. Did you know that every year I have to buy a license from the State Athletic Commission in order to do that announcing?
Wow.
No, you do not, Andrew.
I absolutely do. I don't get any training for that. The state doesn't certainly provide any. And, while I might hurt your feelings with my words, I'm not a public safety threat when I'm up there talking. Let me give you one more example, just because this is particularly absurd.
No, because that made me mad. I don't even want to hear.
It's going to get worse.
No.
In Oklahoma, you must renew your annual license to be a bunk bed salesman.
No way.
I swear, it's $5.
No way.
It's $5. And in exchange, you get absolutely nothing from the state. It's a tax on labor.
Wow.
And the way that plays out for a lot of people who have been convicted of crimes, people are denied occupational licensing for crimes that have absolutely nothing to do with the occupation. Now, you need a license to be a locksmith. Now, if you have a conviction of being a burglar, I understand that. But if I got a DUI 2 years ago, the state has the right to deny me a living as a bunk bed salesman. Make it make sense.
Well, you know what does make sense is that goes back to the poverty prisons in Dickens' day. And if you've ever read any Dickens, and I highly recommend you read his entire catalog. I've never read have I ever read a Dickens book I didn't like? There may have been one. But for the most part, I mean, I've loved his books. And he is so good about explaining debtor's prison and about how in Europe they were doing the exact same thing. Well, you need to go to work, but we're not going to let you do your work because you can't. And then they just throw you in prison. It was just crazy. I like what Julia says here, 1 in 50 back when we were almost free.
Almost.
Well, you got to have a permit to have a garage sale. I mean, come on.
Yeah. And what do you get in exchange? Here's another great example. Have you ever been to the mall and you've seen like the girl at the Clinique counter handing out makeup samples?
No, I don't use makeup. Can you tell?
Well, Well, you don't need it. But
Oh, that was a good comeback.
There we go.
But have you ever been like Macy's or Dillard's and you see these girls handing out like makeup samples? Have you ever experienced this? Have you ever
Yes,
been
I
to a
have.
mall? Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
not if I can help it is the answer to that question, but go ahead.
In order to hand those out, you have to get a license from the state. Now this isn't
Can't be
applying.
serious.
This isn't applying makeup. It's handing those out. You have to buy a license from the state. Again, it's
Oh,
just
Flip.
a tax on labor. That's all it is. Now, for plumbers, nurses, electricians, makes perfect sense. But for these others,
See, I don't even know that it makes perfect sense for that. I mean, I can see that it does protect, like an electrician, for example. I mean, you can literally burn down somebody's house if you miswire it, right? Or kill them, because we had a house that was actually misgrounded, and my husband almost did kill himself trying to redo a something once. So, yeah, I can maybe for that. But I mean, for plumbers or HVAC people, I don't even see the point. If you want to voluntarily get something from the program that you got out of that says, hey, I did this program that would help you be hired by other people, I think that's great. But the state making you become licensed in that is not free market. It's not at all, because I can't tell you the number of HVAC people I've gone through. You suck, moving on. You suck, moving on. It didn't help that they had a piece of paper from the state. They just stunk, and I got rid of them and found somebody new.
yeah,
So
I'm not saying
that's
they're
free
effective,
market.
but the concept that a nurse, must have a degree in nursing, must
Yes.
pass these minimum standards of, for public safety and health and all those things.
Well, and
that
I
makes
agree for
sense.
that for healthcare people, but they're,
Well, but you could do it by just requiring the education, not having a license. You'd have to have a degree in nursing or,
right.
Education in, electricity or whatever, rather than just hammer the license all day long.
Well, I think like food truck licensing, if you, like I said the other day, if you get ptomaine poisoning, you sue the person. I mean, there's no reason. And people who don't have a lot of money and are just trying to make a living, and then we tax them because they're trying to make a living by doing nails or, whatever. It's so
that license
stupid.
is control also, because you can get your license pulled. Now you can't, like Lisa said, you need to put Lisa's comment up there about Brad and the bunk beds. I'm a certified in bunk beds. I'm a quality salesman.
Gosh, we did get a lot of comments.
I mean,
okay.
what if you did a bad job and they pulled your bunk bed license, Jenny? Let's say you said something too political.
Would do a bad job selling you a bunk bed.
What if you have a podcast, you're Jenny White, but on the side you're a bunk bed salesman, and they don't like you, the governor doesn't like you, so they're going to pull your bunk bed license.
Yeah, it's a means
now you
of
can't
control.
sell bunk beds anymore, literally.
Which means your goal should be to get a position on the bunk bed board for the state of Oklahoma.
That's even better. I love you, Andrew. That's exactly right. And we can talk about all of that later.
Bunk beds, Andrew. I mean, literally mind-blowing.
Yeah, it's absurd. And it's hilarious because it's so absurd. But then it's kind of scary. Imagine being in jail and having some scary ass guy ask you, what you in for? Bunk beds, man. Bunk beds. Not only that, those tags on mattresses? I ripped one of them off.
Think about it though.
Better stay away from this guy.
Hey, with that, you could do a whole undercover series going to all these places, almost ringing up a sale, and then you're doing like stings on people that are selling bunk beds that don't have a license. Do a whole expose on the fraudulent licensing of bunk bed salesmen.
Okay, since we've gone way off topic, okay, that begs the question: why? Okay, do you think lobbyists should have to register with the state? Right? You okay, Jenny?
We're laughing, but that's not funny. And I guess that's why I'm getting so hysterical about it, because on one hand, that's hysterical, but then on the other hand, it's just simply not funny at all.
Yeah, well, the absurdity makes it delightful, but the practical application makes it frightening. But I was talking about this with someone the other day that, if you're a lobbyist in the state of Oklahoma, you have to register with the Ethics Commission, and then you're subjected to the Ethics Commission's rules. But if you are a lobbyist and you never register with the Ethics Commission, they have no jurisdiction over you. There are no consequences for lobbying without being registered as a lobbyist. And in fact, you can absolve yourself from their authority by ignoring them completely.
Wow.
Wait, say that again.
In order to be a lobbyist in Oklahoma, a paid lobbyist, you're supposed to register with the Ethics Commission. And then once you register with the Ethics Commission, you're subject to the rules and regulations of the commission. But if you never register as a lobbyist, you're lobbying but never register with the Ethics Commission, you don't have to answer to them. So I always wondered, what is the incentive to register as a lobbyist?
I had no idea there were no teeth in that regulation. But then when you look at the ethics laws, it's a joke. None of them have any teeth. So,
well, they're able to slap fines on people. Apparently that last piece of information was so shocking to Michael, he had to flee the scene.
He did. No, I don't even think it was that. I think it was this comment. I literally almost, I thought I was going to die.
Well,
that's too funny. Adam says the problem is people are not taught intentionally the power and meaning of the Constitution in school. Absolutely. What would be the purpose of doing that, though? I mean, what if we took social studies out and we put back in history and civics? Those kids might learn something and might be able to stand up and say, you know what? You can't tax me for everything. You can't do this. You don't have any power to do that. So I don't think that that's going to happen because we couldn't indoctrinate our children well enough, Adam.
Well, yeah, I mean, we could still have those classes. The question is, who's teaching the class?
Oh, and we know who's teaching them.
Yeah, and what are they teaching?
Oh, Julie said a hospital could require a certain education. And Gracie says state doesn't care if they can do the job or not. They just want the money. And that's an absolute fact. Just wait and see what the real idea is all about. Well, I'm already figuring that out. We're going to have a show on that next Friday or Friday after next? Friday after next. So don't miss the Real ID show. You're going to want that.
Who's leading the charge on that in Oklahoma?
That's just hysterical. It just keeps, she's going to just milk this for all it's worth. You never should have brought that up, Andrew. Lisa's now on a roll. That's how we fought Common Core. We weren't paid, we weren't lobbyists, but we did everything they did as far as educating legislators. That's an absolute fact. Yes. Yeah. Well, I don't know if I'm happy that you came on or appreciate. I mean, because if you made me feel, well, you can't make me feel anything. I began to feel a little moronic about not thinking through that whole thing. So I really appreciate that. And then all the comments, because it was bad. Oh my goodness.
Okay, I'm thinking of like I'm thinking of like 8 Hellen Keller jokes that I'm not going to tell, and just sticking a great deal of restraint on my part.
Oh my goodness! And I'm not. What is? Oh yes. I think
Sachieri she's the one leading the charge against Real ID.
Yes, she's working on that right now. That's, I think, where that went.
It's a pretty good article too, Jeannie. I kind of skimmed through that, but that's actually just, I mean, it's pretty long, but I would just look that up just later on. It's from the socialism.com website.
It is Freedom Socialist Party.
But they go through all of her achievements pretty detailed in there.
Interesting. Well, we've talked about that numerous times, and it does help to have propaganda always works better if you've got a spokesperson for it.
Yeah, yeah. If you can humanize these inhumane concepts, you can make a lot of progress.
Well, yikes. I'm still stuck on the bunk bed thing. I just cannot. How did you even find that? I'm just serious. How did you even find out that you had to have a license to be a bunk bed salesman?
I actually found that out, what would it have been, 2018? I was working on Kathy Costello's campaign for labor commissioner
Yeah.
and doing research on occupational licensing, and just started compiling a list of all the ridiculous things you need a occupational license for.
I just can't even believe that. Well, yeah, I can. Are you kidding me? We have government. I can totally believe that. And you're right, Gloria. History does matter. Adam just had another. I can't get to that though. Well, anything to follow up on that? That was amazing. I'm so glad you came on. What are you going to do next?
Well, I'd love to come on again if you can squeeze me in.
Yeah.
Because I've had a presentation that I've been giving for years. It's just called How to Watch TV News.
Oh, I love that.
And it just breaks down the manipulation and deception that occurs in a lot of reporting. And there are a lot of good journalists out there, but the industry is changing, and I see things on the news every single night that would have gotten anyone fired from any newsroom I ever worked in.
Wow.
It's just, and again, I don't even really blame the reporters. They are doing what they were trained to do in college, and then get it reaffirmed in these newsrooms.
Yeah, I
So
was
have
talking
me
to
back.
somebody who is a journalism major, and she got her journalism major from OU. And she said, and this was, I don't know, maybe in the 80s. I think she's my age, right around my age. So I think maybe she got her degree in the 80s. And we were talking about, gosh, I wish I could remember who this was. But I think we were talking because, my dad was a journalism professor for years and years and years at OU. And I think that's kind of how we got on that discussion. And she said that when she graduated with her degree in journalism from OU, the stuff that she sees now, they were never taught when she graduated. I mean, and she said that now they're literally being taught stuff that was never what they were taught back in the day. And she gave me some really great examples, and I can't remember what they were because they were so good. And when
I think what we think of as journalism, which is objective reporting of the facts, that is really a mid-20th century concept, because newspapers were always political publications, which is why we still have newspapers like the Durant Democrat and the Fairview Republican. These were political publications, and everyone understood that going in. The concept changed around mid-20th century that reporting should be fair, accurate, and balanced. That's what fair, accurate, and balanced was always the
it's fab.
Exactly. That was it. Fab. So I have no problem with, like the Daily Wire or Huffington Post, who reports on things from a political perspective. That's fine, as long as you disclose what your political perspective is.
Yeah.
What chaps me is seeing non-objective reporting, politically driven reporting by people who claim objectivity, and they do so by standing on the shoulders of the journalists who actually did report objectively. And of course, the whole thing is crumbling and falling apart, but it has gone on for far too long.
Well, I'll give you an example. So I get a regular email of what the articles are that are coming out from the Oklahoma Voice. Now, you have to realize that so many of the news media now are privately sourced, right? Not that the New York Times isn't privately owned, right? But these are all privately sourced, and Oklahoma Voice is mainly funded by Kaiser and I think Schusterman. But here is the headline for the bill that Bullard and I think it was Hamilton ran to prevent obscene shows from being done in front of children.
Right. And that just passed yesterday, right?
Correct. And so here's what Oklahoma Voice calls it. Bill impacting drag shows advances.
Well, if it's applied correctly, it will impact drag shows. So fair enough.
It will, but that's, I mean, come on, that's
Yeah.
absolutely ridiculous.
Well, you and I talked about this, Jenny, a couple months ago when all this information was coming about USAID and how grant money was being funneled to these journalistic organizations, because of 4 years ago, a group of us tried to make this work with Project 46.
Yeah, you did.
And it was news and information from a conservative perspective. And we tried and tried, and we could not make the business model work.
Yeah.
And we were like,
because I thought it was a great business model.
All these other independent outlets that we have, and there are like 4 or 5 of them, online media outlets in Oklahoma, we were just like, how in the world are they making this work?
Yeah.
Well, we got the answer a couple months ago. Is that they are being showered with government money funneled through these NGOs.
Yeah.
I think there's grounds for a class action suit there myself.
Well, you'd think so. And then in Oklahoma, we have the big, 4, I think, Kaiser, Schusterman, who are the other several that, pour money into these, news.
Richardson from Paycom.
Okay, yes.
And there probably is a 4th.
And they funnel money into these news organizations and then call them news organizations. And most people buy it. They're like, oh yeah, they're news. Let's go get a couple.
You got a ton of comments.
Oklahoma does have them. And we would love for you to run for labor commissioner.
Hey, Julia, if you're really thinking about that, call me.
There you go. Kitchen looks awfully familiar. Gloria's trying to call you out there, I think. I appreciate independent journalists. Thank you, Andrew, for the truth today. And Kim says, I've never had a journalism degree or any kind of education for it, but anytime I watch a news report, I still have lots of questions, and they seem pretty basic things that are not getting answered. But that's because you pay attention, though, Kim. It's interesting if you look at who really owns the media, it's less than 10 entities. Anti-monopoly laws are no longer effective. And what's sad is that's so true. I mean, about everything.
And you know who's to blame for the complete deregulation of that industry that used to limit there used to be a rule that one company could not own more than one major affiliate, more than on TV, more than one radio. I think it was 2 radio stations. It was Bill Clinton who changed that.
Well, that's shocking. Back in the 70s, there were a ton of Hellen Keller jokes. They were started after the big push in education to have her books in school.
Okay. All right. I'll tell one Hellen Keller joke.
Okay. Hold on. All right. Go ahead.
What is Hellen Keller's favorite color? Corduroy.
Oh.
And that is the nicest Hellen Keller joke I know.
Wow. Jenny, you're really laughing it up today.
Honestly, well, after what happened yesterday at our legislature, I decided, let's laugh because I can't just continue being mad all the time. What's the fee for journalism in Oklahoma? I think, Andrew, you have a pretty good. Our medical schools are apparently teaching how to kill.
I mean, I can't imagine.
I'd agree with that. Go ahead.
Yeah, going back, it just that reminded, and I'm kind of being all ADHD this morning, but can you go back to that previous comment real quick
Sure.
about abortion? Yeah, how to kill babies and mutilate genitals. Do you remember about 5 or 6 years ago when the former governor of Virginia, who is a doctor, described in detail on a radio show on how he murdered an infant, and there was zero outrage about it?
Yeah.
I guess I don't
He was
remember.
literally like, and we keep the babies alive until we harvest their organs. I mean, you don't remember that, Jenny?
It was
Oh my
shocking.
God, no.
And
Yeah.
he was clearly recounting something that he witnessed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He referenced it in the first person, Andrew.
Yeah. And I suspect that was contributed to Glenn Youngkin's win. I hope anyway. But of course, in Virginia, there for the governor, there's a 1-term limit, 1 4-year term. That's it.
Gosh, wouldn't we have benefited from that here? Laughter is a great medicine. Thanks y'all for a very lightning and entertaining time. Well, you did get to see me cry. I was laughing so hard. Holy cow. Wait until people realize that birth control is actually an abortifacient, meaning that those who take, yeah, I don't even want to go into that, Adam, because that's another topic for another day. But the way so many of us women got hooked on birth control pills, and what they do to you, and upsetting your, there were bad things that happened in the 60s and early 70s, and I don't even think we want to look at them now. It would hurt our sentiments. Yeah, and go watch Gosnell, the movie, who Julia is in, which Julia is in, by the way. It's 1:36, so we can probably wind it down now. But yes, Andrew, we will have you back as soon as we're finished here. I will get back with you and we'll put you on the schedule for that, because I think you and I talked about this maybe a year or 2 years ago. Remember, we were going to try to do some kind of thing where we taught people how to parse the news and really, think about what they were hearing and to react thoughtfully to what they were seeing on the news. And we just never got around to doing that. And I think if you've got a presentation, I totally want to see that.
Okay. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you guys very much for having me back on today. Always a blast.
Yes, sir.
It was today. And dang it, next time I want to go to that thing. So let me know. Tell me what it was again. The what?
The Smoke and Guns MMA charity event. It's called Smoke and Guns because it's firefighters and cops.
Oh, got it. Wow. Took me a second to come up with that one too. It must be a Monday, but yet it's a Friday. Andrew, thank you so much for being with us. Sorry about the confusion this morning.
Oh no, the confusion was on my end. Please don't apologize. That was on me.
Bad communication is bad communication. I'm willing to take it on the chin for that. So sorry. But next time, 9 a.m. and we'll see you then.
Okay.
All right, I'll get back with you. Thanks so much. It was great. Enjoyed it so much. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you, guys. Great to see you. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Jenny.
Bye, guys. Bye.
Bye.
Oh, I love Andrew Speno. He's the best.
Hey, I got another quick deal on Hellen Keller.
All right, hold on a second. Governor Ralph Northam, and his eyes were black.
Yeah, Ralph Northam.
When he did it, his eyes were black. Ooh, gross.
I literally remember him.
Anything.
Yeah, I remember him. He was describing it in detail. And I mean, he was like, yeah, we keep the babies alive so we can harvest their organs. And I mean, he was going into like massive details. It was unbelievable.
Thing.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so weird about that. Now, this does make me laugh. John said speechless due to laughter. Honestly, I almost want to go back and clip the bunk bed thing, because that was the funny. I mean, I don't remember laughing that hard in recent memory. That was just too funny. Adam says, thank you. We appreciate you. Oh, great show. Well, thanks for being a part of it as usual, Julia. Okay, so you wanted to show something?
Well, I just while we were talking to Andrew here right at the end, and I was going through some things, I just happened to come across this, so I want to bring it up because you know how I mean, I'm all about team humanity. I'm always anti-eugenics and all of that stuff, and people kind of seem it's hard for them to believe that it's around. But here's the deal with Hellen. Hellen was a prominent advocate for people with disabilities, also had a controversial association with the eugenics movement. In the early 20th century, eugenics was widely accepted as a progressive solution. So that kind of plays into that whole progressive communist Marxist narrative anyway. For societal issues, Keller's endorsement of eugenics must be understood with this historical context. However, her views on eugenics, particularly her support of infant euthanasia, are now widely regarded as unethical and deeply flawed.
What?
But that may, I mean, who knows the association of that? And
euthanasia.
Well, it's probably from maybe she was communicating she doesn't want other deaf blind kids, maybe those kids should, if you find out that you're deaf and blind, or you have some major disability, maybe society should do away with those. I mean, genetics, I mean, eugenics is all about changing the genetic pool, upwards or to whatever whoever's in charge.
If you're Hitler, it was changing it all to blue-eyed, blonde-headed people.
Yeah.
Yes. That was eugenics in the most horrific form ever employed. I don't know. Well, yeah. Because I was going to say any more abortion just isn't about eugenics. It's about convenience.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think I was just like you, Jenny. I mean, you heard the story of Hellen Keller in school and you're like, wow, that's unbelievable. And then that was just kind of the end of it. It was just like, wow, that's, but I think there probably are some legitimate questions to ask there.
Oh, interesting. Abortionists tell moms with healthy babies that their babies have Down syndrome regularly to get them to abort. And I do think that there is something. Oh, Alexander Graham Bell. I'll bring that up to him, Lisa. I'll bring that up to him. I am looking forward to. And Adam says something about look at Canada Made program. I don't know. Don't depress me. I've been laughing about bunk bed salesmen. Okay. I'd like to. Let's start the weekend off on a happy note about how stupid it is to have a license to be a bunk bed salesman.
I'm gonna mention that to my son. He follows this guy on Twitter that's like, it's his channel's called, I think, like Gray Money. And he gives you all these ideas about how to make money kind of, in the gray, not the morally best thing to do.
Sure. Yeah.
And that bunk bed salesman license. I mean, you could probably make some money suing Mathis Brothers, because I guarantee all their people probably don't have bunk bed licenses.
Oh, did you see my shirt today?
Give me liberty or give me death.
Right. But then at the bottom in small letters,
preferably liberty. Yeah, nice.
Preferably. I'll take that one over death, I think.
Well, like we were talking yesterday, Jenny, there's good and evil in this universe. And even though we are more on the cynical side and we get so upset with all the evil that's surrounding us and taking us over in every way and everywhere we look, just like rerunning that bill multiple times till he finally figures out how to get it through, there still is good. And I think that good is going to win ultimately, good and love and and we're going to win in the end. You know, maybe a little painful getting there, but I do think we're going to win.
Well, it's funny because you look at Star Wars. I mean, I look at Star Wars because it came out in the 70s when, you know, I was a kid, basically. And I look at that as the quintessential battle of good against evil. And, you know, I remember when they finally blew up the Death Star, right? And you're just like, ah, and the Ewoks danced. You know, I do believe, I mean, good is going to win over evil 100% anyway. I mean, we know that for a fact. I mean, that's what Jesus tells us. That's what Paul told us. I mean, we know this to be a fact. But man, I think the worst thing, and this is what I think depresses me when I let myself get depressed, this is what depresses me. It's like we were talking about with Real ID, that people they want their convenience more than they want to do the right thing. They just don't.
Well,
And they're not even
for the time being, because that's going to run out at some point. So you're way ahead of the curve on that.
Yeah, no, I get it. But here's the, you know, and just for those of you who are watching, I called Michael yesterday. I was like, talk me off the ledge. Because, you know, here's the thing specifically about the Real ID thing. So, I mean, it's literally in Revelation, right? That you can become assimilate. I'm using 20th century terms, that you can become assimilated into the Borg, you know, if you take this chip or if you have your DNA pulled, and but it's for convenience. And so how many kids are not going to be taught appropriately that this is your assimilation into the Borg is assured if you do that. And that's, I think, the thing that depresses me is I don't want kids being taught that it's okay to do this, that I want them taught that we have to stand up for what we believe in. And, you know, Christians aren't to be assimilated. We're to be kept apart. We're to be kept separate over here. And it may not be fun, and it may hurt, and it may suck, and it may actually be physically painful. We don't know. But it can't be assimilation, right?
Yeah.
And that's the thing that scares me, is I just don't want, I don't like that. Because if you don't know and nobody teaches you that, that's still on you. You know, ignorance isn't a you can't just say, well, I didn't. Huh?
It's not a get out of jail free card.
Right. You can't just tell the officer, well, I didn't even know what that red thing, octagonal red thing was. And then he goes, oh, okay, I get it. It doesn't work that way. I mean, you have to take risk. This goes back to the self-responsibility thing that we're constantly on, right? You have to be responsible for you. You have to be responsible for educating yourself. Nobody else is going to do that. Yeah. And then once you educate yourself, you have to educate the people around you. That's responsibility. That's a responsible thing. And that's, I think, the thing that depresses me is it.
Yeah. I got to grab this call. I got to go.
Okay.
Real quick.
All right. So Lisa, you're cracking me up with this. What do you want to do as a career, Jimmy? Bunk bed salesman, if I can afford the license. That's hysterical. That's true, which is why it's not really funny. And now they have the couch that makes it into a Okay. Get control of yourself. All right. Well, they're going to have to do something else, to make sure we cover that. So thanks for letting that cat out of the bag. Absolutely. Oh my gosh, I made myself dizzy over that. Absolutely, we're going to go back to the roots of the Constitution. A lot of 70s cases are being overturned for the righteousness of the nation. I hope you're right. Good does win in the end. That's right. It's just difficult knowing when the end is and waiting for it. Meanwhile, well, I mean, that's why we have to trim our lamps, right? We have to keep them trimmed because we never know when that's going to happen. Unfortunately, many got the ID before knowing what's happening now. And that's why I'm not like mad at the people who did it, Gloria. I'm not upset because you did, because I have to, if I'm going to point the finger at you, I have like all of mine, like 8 more pointing back at me, right? Because I didn't stop when they gave me my new ID and said, no, you can't have your glasses on for this picture. And I should have gone, what do you mean I can't have my glasses on for this picture? But then they made me put my thumbprint down, and I was like, I'm not giving you my thumbprint. And I was super upset about that. And I said, well, what happens if I don't do that? And she was like, well, then you don't get a driver's license. And it happened so fast. It was kind of like what happened when I told you guys what happened when I came back from Las Vegas or when I was at the Oklahoma City airport leaving for Utah, and that lady goes, here, stand here. She didn't tell me what's going to happen to me. She just said, stand here. So I did that. And then they took my photograph. Ugh. And then when they used my driver's license to get on the plane without my boarding pass. See, all of this stuff is happening so fast and without us knowing anything about it. And I guess the only way to stop any of it is just go, no, I'm not doing anything for you. You better stop and tell me why, and making a big stink about it. I don't know how to fix that. So I totally get it. And I'm with you, Gloria. And you're not going to see me pointing fingers at people who have done it, because so many people don't have the level of cynicism, that so many of us have, which just says, I don't trust anything the government says in any shape or function. And then they just don't do it. So many people don't have that. So many people still honestly believe that the government has their best interests. And this whole scam is to protect them from bad people, not to make you a bad people, right? I mean, they just don't get it. And John says getting a chip. And people, haven't you seen on the internet videos of people who do it voluntarily and then are like, look, isn't this so convenient? And then I just go like this. And then I pay for that just by going, plink. Isn't this great? I mean, there's not even a fiber of my being that can even sort of understand that. I just can't even sort of. Education is paramount. Not to be Debbie Downer. Your name is Sandy, not Debbie. It's got an E at the end, but it's not. I'm afraid this starts teaching kids to be compliant in elementary school. Oh my gosh, Sandy. There is an article that I just read. And hold on 1 second. I'm going to find this for you because I want you guys to read it. Okay, it was okay, hold on. Hold on. I'm getting there. I promise. It's right here. Okay, here it is. It's called Digital Driver's Licenses Now Accepted at TSA Checkpoints, Mobile ID World. And this article basically talks about the fact that what they're doing in schools with this, oh, well, in order to get your lunch, you're going to have, put your thumbprint down or put your palm print down, or, it's so easy. We're teaching kids to give up their biometric identity. And you're exactly 100%, like pretty much 100% of the time, you're 100% right, Sandy. And that's what they are. And they say that they're doing that on purpose. And all of the parents, I don't understand why all of the parents aren't going, you can't have my kid. I would can you imagine what I would do if my kids were little and they were being told that? I told them they couldn't have a lunch pass or a food pass in college. I was like, there's no way you're doing that. I mean, Gloria's getting up. Yes, kids aren't be telling that they don't have to comply with whatever is being asked. They're rebel now by being trans or non-binary. Oh my God. That's so true. I never put that together. Oh, Lisa, you have gotten on my last nerve now today with all the bunk bed stuff. And now with that, I just don't know what to do with you because I had never put that together. But you're right. We're teaching them to rebel, but in all of the wrong ways. Oh my goodness. Laughter is like good medicine. That is true. I agree with that. My people perish for, well, that's why we started this program. Adam, that's why we started it, because I felt like God told me, and I got up one morning and I was reading my Bible and I felt like he said, my people perish for lack of knowledge. And so he said, you better go out and do this. And so I did. And that's how it started. Yes. Wait until we visit the Constitutional Convention. Oh, you mean like when Andrew does a show on it? So subtle. No, but that's what we've been talking about. It is so subtle. Nobody really notices. True, Tammy, but some of us are awake and watching and speaking out, and that's true. Yes. Oh, Tammy. Yes. And that's exactly right. So many people, well, and it happened to me so fast. My neurons didn't even have time to get together and explode into, you're going to make me do what? Suck it. It didn't happen because it happened so fast and my mind just went like that. You're exactly right. You're exactly right. Then there is no informed consent anymore, only implied. And I think that's true. The history of it, the history of the Constitutional Convention. I got it. Yes. Chip in the hand is yes. Thank you. When they have the clinics in schools, they'll have their DNA. I'm glad you brought that up because this whole SB 224 that we talked about at the very beginning of the program, I think it ties back to doing what you were saying, what you're saying right there. They want schools to be able to get Medicare money, and schools want to be able to get Medicare money because they don't only care about money. They don't care about kids. And so they're going to be able to use this as a way to say, oh, look, we care about kids. We want them to get their health care here. And we can get them on Medicare here. And the only way to do that is by getting them into a state longitudinal database that feeds all of that stuff into the federal government. And then voila, you've got that all where it is. So don't even think that that's not what's going on. I 100% agree. They bring it in so slyly. That's right. The thing all started with having a lunch number. 100%. Art of war, demoralizing over 3 to 5 generations. You won't know. Yeah, that's 100% there too. Parents think this is a great thing, Jenny. So easy, convenient. No need for that messy lunch packing or finding money for school lunch. You just show your personal body parts and it's very unique. And then you get your free food. Yep. 100%. We need a show about school-based healthcare. I'm going to write myself a note about that. Thank you, Tammy, because we do. And I think I can get some people to do that. So let me see what I can work out. Another verse of providing what parents don't. Yep. Adds all the AI and data to enable the citywide cameras for CCP surveillance. Oh, no. Okay. Yikes. Sarah Stitt Hope Program. Yes. Supports community schools. All your needs met in school. No need for parents. Yes. That is a Sarah Stitt thing, and it has been pushed out by our governor and into so many schools. So yes, that's correct. All right. That's our last comment for today, I think. Isn't it? Yes, except it doesn't want, my program doesn't want to work. Hold on. Wait, there was one more. See, people realize when you put your child in public school, you do give up many rights to them. Yes, and that's actually true. And 1984 was not a story. And neither was Fahrenheit 451. So you need to go back and read that one too, because that's just as scary and what's going on now, just like 1984. So I completely agree with that. Everybody, we've had almost 2 hours of show today. And I don't want to get into the habit of going to 3. So we're going to get off of here for today. Try to stay dry today. Somehow we missed the storm that was supposed to come up at 9:30. So no idea what's going on now. It should be a beautiful weekend. I'm so hopeful that you guys have a wonderful, beautiful weekend and get together with your family and your friends and smile and laugh and think about Jesus, because there's our only hope. So thanks again for tuning in. We just love you so much and just appreciate you so much as an audience. Share, share, share. Don't forget, we'll be back at 9 a.m. on Monday morning to totally suss out this horror show that happened at the state capitol yesterday, where our Speaker of the House, Kyle Hilbert, just got to decide that we can hear bills multiple times until we get the result that leadership wants. So we'll be talking about that, sussing that whole thing out at 9 a.m. live on Monday morning. Please be here with us. Until that time, have a great weekend, and we'll see you again soon. Thanks so much for joining us. Bye-bye.